The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is your embassy in the heart of Israel, founded in 1980. From our headquarters in Jerusalem through our branches in over 80 nations and yours in Canada, we seek to challenge the Church to take up its scriptural responsibilities, to remind Israel of the promises made to her in the Bible, and to be a source of practical assistance to all the people in the land of Israel. On today's program, a lesson about anti-Semitism, a visit to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, and a Holocaust survivor tells her riveting story through her artwork.
Hello, I'm Donna Holbrook, and today I want to talk to you about anti-Semitism. The European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights adopted a working definition of anti-Semitism as follows. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community, institutions, and religious facilities. In addition, such manifestations could also target the state of Israel, conceived as a Jewish state. Anti-Semitism frequently manifests itself by accusing Jews of conspiring to harm humanity. It is often used to blame Jews for why things go wrong. It employs sinister stereotypes. Sadly, the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights has just released a major poll showing an alarming rise in anti-Semitism. It isn't difficult to see how such tactics can harm a group of people collectively and the state of Israel. Anti-Semitism is manifested in the form of branding Israel as an apartheid state. This is not the truth. Israel welcomes persecuted Christians from Sudan and other surrounding areas. Israel offers Arabs equality. Arabs are not only given voting rights, but they also hold positions in Knesset, that's Israel's government. Israel was attacked when it declared a state in 1948 by surrounding Arab nations and again in 1967. The PA Charter, Fatah, and Hamas charters all call for the destruction of Israel, and Iran is an ever-present threat. Though Israel is hated by surrounding states, and though the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem worked with Hitler to try to annihilate the Jews, and though PA leader Mahmoud Abbas did his PhD in Holocaust denial, Israel is the one that is blamed for the strife in the Middle East and unjustifiably faces boycotts, divestments, and sanctions against it. Jesus prophesied in Luke 21:24 that Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Let us continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and remember the words in Psalm 122. May they prosper who love you. Peace be within your walls. Prosperity within your palaces. Scripture also teaches in Genesis 12:3, in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. To the nation of Israel, God gave his revelation to mankind, his nature, his laws, and the history of creation. In Galatians 4:4, God sent to the Jewish people Jesus of Nazareth, who was the Messiah, or Anointed One, the Christ.
I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come.
Dr. Kokkonen, would you like to share with our viewers about what are the different forms of anti-Semitism? What is anti-Semitism and how does it show up?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, because if we look at anti-Semitism and we think that it's always the same and we can instantly recognize it, we would be wrong. If we think about what we call the traditional anti-Semitism, that was Christian anti-Semitism. That was the church attitude, the things that the church fathers said about the Jews, the accusations against them. And that was the major cause of anti-Semitism in the Middle Ages and so on. Until we come to the age of Enlightenment and the French Revolution, and the Jews in Western Europe received their civil rights. And that's a really important turning point, because anti-Semitism now changes, and from the classical, traditional Christian anti-Semitism, it changes and it becomes social and economic anti-Semitism that says Jews have too much power, they are too wealthy, they are too much connected, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, when we come to the 1870s and turn of the century, we have all these racial ideas. And racism becomes now a topic that is studied in the Western universities. So here we can already identify 3 different forms of anti-Semitism, and that naturally leads us to ask, what is anti-Semitism today? So, for example, when we think about all the criticism of the State of Israel, we realize that many of the accusations and even the images that are used against the State of Israel are the same ones that were used in the Middle Ages against individual Jews or Jewish communities. So I think that's how we understand. We can understand that these different forms, they still coexist together. And there are new forms that come in depending on what is the time we are living in. So, for example, one of the things that I would identify today, just to give an example of how this Middle Eastern imagery has come into the modern anti-Semitism. Actually, on the Holocaust Memorial Day a year ago, there was a cartoon published depicting Prime Minister Netanyahu building a wall using the blood and bodies of Palestinian children. When we think about that picture, we understand that that picture could easily have come from the Middle Ages or even from the Nazi propaganda. And then, of course, another thing that is quite important is that the Holocaust denial, that is something that we also call anti-Semitic. To deny the Holocaust when we have so much evidence, when we are right now standing at the Yad Vashem archives, where we have millions of documents from the Jewish victims, from the people who survived, and from the Germans themselves. We know that the Holocaust happened. To say that it didn't happen, that is also a form of anti-Semitism. If we think about the classical anti-Semitism as Christian anti-Semitism, we realize that, of course, these attitudes, they existed in one way or another in the churches until we come up to the period of the Holocaust. So, for example, when we ask ourselves, why were there so few people who chose to help the Jews? Why did not more people come to rescue the Jews? We understand that this existing anti-Semitism, sometimes, even if the conditions were right to help someone, the anti-Semitism made it impossible mentally for the person to take that step. And if we look at the churches at the time of the Holocaust, there was a very long tradition of replacement theology, of even blaming the Jews for the death of Jesus. So, of course, it was very difficult to recognize the Jews as our neighbors, think that you needed to help them if you had always been taught that they were guilty of these horrible things. So at the time of the Holocaust, we clearly see this because, for example, in Nazi Germany, we see that many church leaders, they openly identify with Adolf Hitler. And there are very few church leaders that decide to take a stand that is very unpopular and to come to the rescue of the Jews. Now, often when we think about the Holocaust, we like to think that it ended in 1945 and that everything has changed afterwards. But that is not true unless the theology has changed. And that's the question, has the theology changed so much that our attitudes towards the Jews have changed? And I would think that in some instances, at least, it's quite easy to see that even though there was a recognition of guilt and there was some repentance towards the anti-Semitism that had contributed to the Holocaust, but there was also a cold attitude towards the Jewish state. And I think that's something that we need to think about when we try to identify anti-Semitism or church attitudes and what comes from the time before the Holocaust. Then we also need to understand that the attitude towards the state of the Jews that has come to represent everything that is Jewish today. And I think Yad Vashem is one of the places that is best equipped to tell the truth. And one of the things that we do is the seminar that we do for Christian leaders. We invite Christian leaders from all over the world to come here to study not only the Holocaust, but anti-Semitism today, to meet with the Holocaust survivors, to hear their stories. But also, I think that we all have a personal choice. At the time of the Holocaust, most people chose to become silent bystanders. And when you are a silent bystander, you are actually siding with the perpetrator. And we have all the freedom in the world to speak up. So the question is, why are we then silent? And I think we need to educate ourselves first, and then we need to educate the people around us, the churches, even the church leaders. And then we are able to influence the events around us. One of the projects that Yad Vashem has been doing in 2013 is called Gathering the Fragments. And what we are trying to do actually before the survivors pass away is to collect the important things, the evidence, the documents of the Holocaust, and bring it here to the archives of Yad Vashem so that everybody will be able to see the things that they managed to bring with themselves when they came to Israel. One of the things that we have here is actually a soup bowl from the Dachau concentration camp. That is a very important piece of information, because if you look at Holocaust survivor testimonies, they often actually mention these soup bowls. So here we have one. We have clothing, clothes that children used. We have a teddy bear, things that people had managed to bring with them when they came to Israel. Here we have actually a photo album, and that is very rare. There aren't that many albums that actually survived. And this family, they actually managed to take it with them when they sailed to Israel. And then, of course, we have people who were fighting in the Soviet army. There are many such veterans who came to Israel, to Eretz Israel after the war, so they always have these medallions. And actually in the Holocaust Memorial Day, you would see many such veterans wearing their medallions. And here we have a prayer book. Prayer books were very rare, and people, if they could manage to get one, we know stories where the survivors, they were in a camp and they would even sell their last piece of bread to be able to get a prayer book. So that was something very, very special. And there's actually a handwritten prayer book there, so that's even more unique. We have some works of art that we have been given, and then somebody had managed to take apart. You see the number from the concentration camp. They had managed to take that from the shirt, and that's here. And the numbers, of course, are very important, because based on the number you could know when the person had come into the camp. Just lots of dolls. Dolls are actually a very interesting part, because the dolls at that time, they were very different from what we have today. And most of the people, the little girls who had a doll, they had it with them when they were in hiding in a convent or with a Christian family somewhere. And we know that it was very hard for them to give up those dolls. And why is that? You know, that doll is more than a doll. That's the only thing that the person has from their family. So that doll, when you give up the doll, it's like you are losing the last person, the last contact with your family. But we have some of them here at Yad Vashem. Some of the people who donated them, they wrote letters to the dolls before they gave them over.
In honor of the International Holocaust Memorial, I decided to show here a demonstration of my art projects that represent scenes from my life during the Holocaust. These are part of the pictures. There's not enough space for all of my artwork. But here, you can begin to get an idea of what happened during those horrible years of the Holocaust. In the middle of the night, in this picture, they came to our door. You saw these soldiers, and they put us out of our home. We began to walk on foot. They didn't take us in cars, or we began a death march on foot. I was a small girl, 8 years old. I didn't like to eat much, and I was very weak. And after walking for several days, I wasn't able to walk any further. I sat and I said, no matter what will be, my mother and my father said, in a little while, they will kill you. She said, I don't care what happens. If I don't get food, I have no strength to walk, and what will be, will be. A soldier came, and he was about to shoot me. And my mother, who was pregnant, and she went down on her knees and began to kiss his feet. Please, please, don't kill my only daughter. My father, that knew the language, begged and pleaded, please do not kill her. I will put her on my shoulders. Here, we're continuing the march, and he carries me on his shoulders. After we had gone for a few months, sometimes 40 kilometers a day, this was a march that no one wanted to take all of the Jewish people from Ukraine and from Transnistria. So they would take us to one place and then to another place. And my mother, at one point, she was pregnant, she began to have birth pangs and was in labor. It was about certain that they were going to kill her, because if you can't walk, then you're shot. Somehow, she was saved. Here she's going to give birth. And suddenly, just like something in the film, came a horse with a cart as they came close to us. And I remember this picture as if it happened yesterday. And he says to the soldier, don't kill the woman. I will take her to my house. And there she'll give birth. I don't know how he was convinced. But this farmer was allowed to take my mother, and we all went to this man's house. My father, myself, and then my mother, we came to this farmer's house, and now I think that they had no children. They put my mother in a sort of storage area, and it was a deathly cold place. And we were very close to her. And we were there during the birth. The wife of the farmer is the one who helped with the birth. I heard the first cries of the baby. She took her in her arms. She came to my father and me and said that the baby had died. She took the baby. Until today, I have it in my mind that if this baby still lives in some place, I can never know. What village this was, we don't know. We were in many different villages. But this is the story in short. In the Ukraine, it's very cold in the winter. Sometimes the temperatures are below 40 degrees, minus 40. And we're not dressed as we need to be. We didn't have clothes. We were staying in places where they put the pigs and places that were in storage places. Here I am very sick. I was almost, I could have died. It was very cold. My father, who had worked in taking the dead people away for burial, he took one of the coats of the people and put it on me. And he only remained with one shirt on himself in the terrible cold that was there. God really watched over him. I had really great, good fortune. All the illnesses and diseases that were there I experienced, but by miracle I remained alive. And now I would like to tell you about this picture. One day, all the Jews had received an order to collect themselves together on the Buk River. This is one of the rivers in Ukraine. And we were on the edge of the Buk River. And all the Jews that were there, the very few who yet remained alive, were ordered to gather next to the river and by the forest there. All the elderly people were ordered to get into the water, which were half frozen. The rest of us were to remain on the border of the river in order to watch what was happening. And you see here, some of them entered the water and never came out. The weakest ones. Those who remained alive, they told them to go under the water and to come back out, to go back under and to come back up. The soldiers stood on the banks of the river and laughed and at what they were doing and what was happening. I stood to the side with a few children, and of course I cried and screamed, and I thought I would remain with no parents. After some amount of time, which I can't remember how long it was, they were ordered, those who had survived, to come out of the water. And when they walked, their clothes were wet and completely frozen on them because of how cold it was outside. They came to the storage type area where we were staying, and they had fever. It looked like they were going to die. They were completely finished. I thought I could offer them a glass of water or something. I had to take care of them. In a miracle, by miracle of God, they remained alive. After this event, here, you see us when we went into the village. It was kind of boring for us to all the time be in this little storage unit area. In this picture, my father had to take the dead people's bodies in the wagon and cart them away, people who had died. This is a picture that I drew a couple of days ago.
But just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you also excel in this grace of giving.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to endorse the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem and also the branch in Canada. We are Canadians who have made Aliyah. We made our Aliyah to come to Israel over 40 years ago. And yet we're, culturally and ethnically Canadian, but we're also Jewish, so we're kind of a strange mixture. But we are so grateful for the work that Donna Holbrook is doing and the team of ICEJ Canada, an amazing job of getting the truth out in the media concerning Israel today.
We don't need one more synagogue here or one more church.
Yes.
We need something that bridges all of these things. And we felt that because the embassies left Jerusalem because of oil pressure, that we thought with an embassy for the kingdom of God, which transcends all this bickering and stuff at this level, would be what the world needs, this area needs. And so we started it, got together back in 1980, and within 10 days we put the embassy idea together, and within 3 weeks it was established, and it's been going for 33 years. So the important thing is that visions are hatched here because it's a vitally inspirational area. It inspires you to do other things. It doesn't inspire you to be comfortable.
It all started when we first made plans to come to Israel. And we finally got on the plane after a lot of false starts. And when that plane came down to the Ben Gurion airport, I'm not a person that cries easily, and I absolutely lost it, totally. And I was just sobbing, and Murph said, "What's the matter with you?" And I said, "I don't know. All I know is that I'm coming home." And I think for so many Christian people, it is like coming home, and it's a bit of a shockaroo because they don't think of that as being anything other than, well, I'm going to go for a cruise this year, or I'm going to go to Timbuktu, for 2 weeks. But I say I'm going to go to Israel, they don't realize that they're going to be transformed people. If they really have eyes to see and ears to hear, while they're here, something's going to happen. They're going to have a real encounter with the living God of Israel.
Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to visit our website at www.icejcanada.tv. 100% of what we receive from you toward a project goes to that designation. Through your contribution to ICEJ Canada, you can participate by giving to Bet Singer Children's Orphanage Bathrooms, Christian Friends of Yad Vashem, Home for Holocaust Survivors, Israeli Youth at Risk Summer Camp in Canada, Operation Life Shield Bomb-Proof Shelters, Red Carpet Project Women at Risk in Tel Aviv, Shoulder to Shoulder New Immigrant Partner Project, Women's Shelter Project, General Fund, Gift Estate Securities Funds, ICEJ Communication Media Fund,